No one knew that on the night the thunder split the sky, a solitary man in a quiet cornfield would save the life of the most powerful woman in America without knowing who she was. Willamette Valley, Oregon. The first crack of thunder came just before midnight. Jack Whitaker stood on the porch of his weather-beaten farmhouse, a chipped mug of cold coffee in his calloused hand. Rain hammered the tin roof in uneven bursts, and a gust of wind rattled the porch swing that had been silent since Sarah passed. Behind him, in the warm light of the kitchen, his daughter Ella sat cross-legged at the table, her fingers stained with graphite as she sketched wings. "If I angle the flaps back 5 degrees, do you think the glide ratio improves?" she called out, not looking up. Jack smiled, soft and tired. "Try it in tomorrow's wind. The valley always tells the truth." Then came the sound. A shriek in the sky, shrill, metallic, followed by a sickening thud that vibrated through the earth. Jack dropped the mug. It shattered at his feet. He was running before his brain could catch up. Boots slammed against wet dirt. He grabbed the flashlight from the hook, his army instincts kicking in like old muscle memory. The storm had turned the backacres into a slick battlefield, but he didn't slow down. When he crested the rise beyond the barn, he saw it. A downed aircraft. A single-prop plane, nose buried in his cornfield. One wing mangled, the other torn away entirely. Smoke rose in tendrils, and fire, small, hungry, had already begun licking at the engine. "Damn it," he breathed, and sprinted toward the wreck. The pilot's side was crumpled inward. Jack yanked on the door. It wouldn't budge. He smashed the window with the base of his flashlight, reached in, and found skin. Warm, barely moving. A woman. She was unconscious, slumped against the harness, blood trickling down her temple. Her pulse fluttered beneath his fingers. Her breath, shallow but present. "Hang on," Jack growled, cutting the strap with his pocket knife. He pulled her free just as the gas tank exploded behind them, throwing them both to the ground. His ears rang. Smoke filled his nose. But she was alive. He dragged her through the corn, through mud, through the breathless dark, until the porch light of the house shone like a beacon. Ella had the door open before he could knock. The girl's eyes widened at the sight of the woman in his arms, singed and bleeding. "I've got the first aid kit," she said, already running. They laid the woman on the couch. Jack checked for fractures, made sure her breathing stayed even. As he pulled the blanket over her, her eyes flickered open, barely. "Don't tell anyone. I'm here," she rasped. "Call me Anna. Just Anna." Jack nodded, confused but focused on her safety. "All right, Anna. You're safe now." By morning, the rain had eased to a mist. Jack woke up stiff and sore from sleeping in the armchair by the window. The woman, Anna, was still asleep, though color had returned to her cheeks. Ella, bright-eyed and barefoot, stood at the stove flipping pancakes. She glanced over. "She's got cuts, but nothing's broken. And she knew about Newton's third law." Jack chuckled softly. "That's one way to earn your trust." When Anna woke, she winced but sat up, steadying herself. "You pulled me out," she murmured. Jack nodded. "Yeah, you were going down fast." "I don't remember the crash. Just falling." Ella set a plate on the table. "You know about flight, right? I made this glider last week. Maybe you could help me tweak it?" Jack expected hesitation. Instead, Anna smiled. "I'd love to." They spent the morning at the kitchen table. Anna, still bruised, sketching airflow diagrams on napkins with Ella. Jack watched quietly from the doorway, heart pinched with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. Anna was sharp. Sharp in a way that didn't just come from textbooks. She spoke like someone used to being heard. But she listened too, especially to Ella, who had never had a real teacher that saw her. When Jack offered to take Anna to urgent care in town, she shook her head. No hospitals, no press, just a few more days to rest. Jack didn't ask why. Not yet. That evening, Jack was out fixing the fence line when he found it. A small leather wallet half buried in mud near the wreck. Inside, beneath the rain-streaked cards, was a Skylens ID badge. Madison Chen, CEO. Jack froze. He'd heard the name. Everyone had. Forbes, TechCrunch, the woman behind the AI-powered drone revolution. The woman who, last quarter, was said to be worth nearly $600 million. His eyes narrowed. She'd said Anna. She'd lied. That night, as they sat on the porch again, sipping tea, Jack finally spoke. You could have told me who you were. Madison didn't flinch. I didn't think it mattered. You crashed in my field, bled on my sofa, and taught my daughter about lift coefficients. Of course it matters. She looked up at the stars, her voice low. I just wanted one place where I wasn't someone's headline. Silence stretched between them. The crickets chirped louder. Jack sipped his tea. Then maybe you came to the right place. She turned toward him, eyes softening. Maybe I did. And for the first time since the explosion, they both smiled, not out of politeness, but recognition. Something unspoken had taken root between them, beneath the ashes, amid the corn. Willamette Valley, Oregon. The morning after. Madison Chen awoke to the scent of buttermilk pancakes and the soft murmur of a child's voice. At first, she wasn't sure where she was. The ceiling above her was old, paint peeling in one corner, a single bulb hanging from a wire. Outside the window, mist crawled along the cornfield like a waking breath. It was quiet in a way Silicon Valley never was. No push notifications, no glowing screens, just wind and floorboards creaking with memory. Her ribs ached, her head throbbed, and then she heard it again, that voice. But if the drag increases too fast, it won't lift, even if I get the angle right. A girl, curious, smart. Madison pulled herself upright on the faded couch. A blanket was tucked around her. A glass of water rested on the crate that served as a side table. Her clothes, charred and stiff, had been folded neatly on a chair, replaced by a soft flannel shirt and drawstring pants far too large for her. She hadn't been in a place like this since before everything changed, since before venture capitalists started calling her a visionary, since before power had begun to feel like a prison made of glass and gold. She swung her feet to the floor, then took a shaky breath and walked toward the sound. Ella sat at the kitchen table surrounded by torn-up notebook pages, plastic glider parts, and a grease-stained physics manual from the 1980s. Her dark blonde hair was pulled back in a messy braid, and her nose was smudged with pencil lead. She didn't look up as Madison entered. I'm trying to figure out why my model keeps stalling, she said. It's got to be something with how I designed the rudder. Madison leaned against the doorway, still lightheaded. May I see? Ella blinked up. Sure. She handed her the sketch. You're Anna, right? Madison hesitated. Yes, she said quietly. Anna Lee. Cool name, Ella said without judgment. Dad's making eggs. He says if you want aspirin or coffee, just holler. Madison smiled. I'll take both. Jack Whitaker didn't say much when she stepped into the kitchen. He was barefoot, flipping eggs on a cast-iron skillet like he'd been doing it every morning for decades. A scar ran down his forearm, old and pale. His eyes flicked to her and then back to the pan. Got a name for your headache? Anna, she said again. He nodded once. Coffee's fresh. She accepted the cup with both hands, grateful. Thank you for everything. I shouldn't be here. You're alive, Jack said simply. That's more than you were supposed to be, considering what I saw out there. Madison sipped her coffee. What did you do before this life? Jack didn't answer right away. Ella answered for him. He was an avionics technician in the Army, Afghanistan, Iraq. He fixes things. Madison glanced at Jack with new understanding. Then I got lucky. No, Jack said flatly. You got pulled out of a fire by someone who didn't have time to ask questions. The morning passed slowly, gently. Ella continued to chatter about flight patterns and Bernoulli's principle, and Madison listened, captivated. The girl had the kind of hunger Madison hadn't seen in years. Not for wealth, but for knowledge, for answers, for reasons behind the reasons. She was so much like Madison had been at that age, except Ella didn't have anything close to the resources Madison had grown up with. No private schools, no summer robotics camps, just duct tape, YouTube videos, and a father who believed in her even when no one else had a reason to. Jack offered to drive Madison to town, a hospital, a motel, but she declined both. Her ankle was swollen but not broken, and the last thing she wanted was to be photographed and tracked. Do you mind if I stay just one more day? She asked quietly. Jack stared at her for a moment too long, and then he nodded. One day. That evening, the three of them sat on the porch as the sun dipped behind the rolling hills. Ella lay on the steps, her fingers twisting grass stems into knots. Jack sat in the corner with a crossword. Madison cradled a hot mug and tried to remember the last time she'd felt still. Did you always want to live here? She asked him. No one wants to live here, Jack said. People just come back to it when everything else breaks. She glanced sideways. Is that what happened? Jack didn't look up from his puzzle. Something like that. Ella chimed in. Mom died when I was 6. We were in D.C. before that. Dad says cities are too loud. Madison's eyes softened. I'm sorry. Ella just shrugged. I miss her, but Dad's good at fixing sadness. He lets me fly things when I get really down. Madison blinked away the sudden sting behind her eyes. Later, when Ella had gone to bed, Madison stayed behind. The stars were brilliant, more than she remembered existed, and the silence felt sacred. Why didn't you ask more? She said finally. About the crash. About me. Jack set his crossword down. Because if you wanted to talk, you would. She nodded slowly. I wasn't flying that plane by accident. I needed to get away. I needed to see what it felt like to be small again. I forgot how to land. Literally and figuratively. Jack let the silence breathe before replying. You landed here. That counts. She turned toward him, her face bathed in moonlight. Do you ever miss your old life? All the time, Jack said. but I never forget why I left. Madison stared out at the cornfield, where charred earth still marked where the wreck had been. I don't know if I want to go back, she whispered. Jack took a sip of his tea. Then don't. Not yet. She closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she allowed herself not to plan the next move. 3 days after the crash, Willamette Valley, Oregon. Jack didn't mean to find it. He hadn't gone looking. He was just folding the flannel shirt she'd borrowed, smoothing it like a habit left over from the army. But the tablet had slipped from behind the cushions where she must have tucked it, its sleek carbon casing far too expensive for someone named Anna Lee, who claimed to have been flying for fun. He picked it up, his calloused fingers awkward against the glass. The screen flickered to life. No password. Just a name on the lock screen. Skylens. CEO, device, Marger01, Madison Chen. Jack stared at it. The wind rustled the corn outside, but inside the room, everything was still. He remembered the headlines. The woman on magazine covers. The youngest female CEO to ever lead a tech unicorn into IPO before 35. She had once told a Harvard audience, "Innovation must be both human and holy." He remembered that quote. It stuck in his bones for some reason. And now she was in his living room, eating his eggs, laughing with his daughter. Lying. He placed the tablet back where he found it, closed the blanket over it, and walked to the porch. His breath was shallow. He didn't know if it was from betrayal or something else. When Madison walked into the kitchen 20 minutes later, Jack didn't look up from the sink. The faucet dripped in an old rhythm. Ella had gone outside with her sketchbook, sitting in the tall grass to study birds. Madison smiled. "Hey, you okay?" Jack turned off the water, dried his hands. His back remained to her. "I found your tablet." A pause. Then, "Oh." "Skyland's CEO," he said flatly. "You left that part out." Madison's smile vanished. "I was going to tell you," she said quietly. "I just needed space. One day where no one bowed or spun my words into market signals. One day where I was just a woman who made a mistake in the sky." Jack turned around, his face unreadable. "You didn't trust me." "No, I didn't trust anyone," she said. "Not after the last few years." There was a silence, brittle and long. "I didn't ask for your trust," Jack said. "I pulled you out of fire because that's what a man should do. No contracts. No resume." "I know," Madison whispered. "That's why I didn't want to ruin it." Jack stared at her. "You didn't ruin it by being rich, Madison. You ruined it by pretending you weren't." She looked away, ashamed. But then Ella burst in, waving a page. "Anna, look! I adjusted the tail. It flew 30 feet. Jack looked at his daughter, radiant, joyful. She didn't know what Skylens was. She just knew this woman had helped her understand flight better than any teacher ever had. And Jack, despite himself, softened. That evening, after Ella had gone to bed, Madison came out to the porch with a cup of tea and a folded apology in her hands. "I should have told you," she said, not sitting yet. "I've built a world where people only see me as two things, powerful or profitable. I didn't know how to exist in yours." Jack didn't speak. "I never lied about the storm. Or the crash," she continued. "I really thought I was going to die. That fire was seconds from swallowing me. But then I woke up in your home with your daughter asking if I liked cinnamon toast." She laughed softly, broken. I forgot what it felt like. To be safe. Finally, Jack looked at her. You are safe here. Madison sat down, slowly. Even now? He nodded. Even now. She exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing for the first time since the crash. I used to believe people like you didn't exist anymore, she said. And I used to believe people like you didn't care unless there was a stock ticker attached, he replied. Madison gave a crooked smile. Maybe we're both wrong. Maybe, Jack said. They sat like that until the stars came out again, until silence was no longer awkward, but shared. The next morning, Madison stood at the mailbox, her ankle still sore but improving. She looked down the gravel road that led nowhere fast, phone in hand. She was supposed to be in Zurich. A tech summit, investors waiting, interviews booked. Instead, she was here. With no makeup, in borrowed jeans, debating whether to check her inbox, she opened the screen. Hundreds of messages. But one subject line stopped her. Internal leak. Icarus Plus algorithm detected in Red Nova repo. Her blood turned to ice. She tapped it open. From Nathan Chu, Chief of Engineering Madison, we've detected a partial match of the Icarus Plus neural sequence in Red Nova's early-stage prototype. The fingerprint is 82.6%. Someone leaked it. It wasn't one of the devs. Could be external. I've paused all updates until further notice. We need you back. Madison's heart raced. Red Nova was her competitor. And Icarus Plus, her life's work. The AI-assisted flight software wasn't just another product. It was the culmination of her late father's vision and her own obsession with human-machine cooperation. She clutched the phone. Someone was stealing her future, and the only place she felt safe was 30 feet behind her, on a creaky porch, where a widower in boots was teaching his daughter how to weld. Tatu. That evening, she sat across from Jack and told him the truth, fully this time. Someone's trying to destroy everything I've built, and I don't know who to trust anymore, she said. Icarus Plus isn't just about planes. It's about making tech that obeys human limits, that listens instead of leads. Jack listened quietly. Madison continued. If they steal it, if Red Nova beats us to market, it could mean autonomous weapons, not just assistive tools. It could become something I never meant it to be. You think someone in your company leaked it? I think someone in my industry did, she said. Someone who believes the end always justifies the profit. Jack folded his arms. So why are you here? Madison looked him in the eye. Because if I go back without grounding myself first, I'll become one of them. Jack stood slowly. And then, without drama, without permission, he picked up his wrench, pointed to the barn, and said, Come help us finish Ella's glider. You'll think better with tools in your hand. Madison blinked, then smiled, and followed. Madison had left her private jet grounded in a hangar at San Francisco International Airport. Not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. She was done arriving like royalty. For once, she wanted to walk into a room not by descending stairs from the sky, but by opening a door like everyone else. So she sat in the back seat of a black SUV beside Ella, who had her nose pressed to the window, counting Teslas and marveling at the skyscrapers. Jack sat quietly in the passenger seat, his shoulders slightly hunched, jacket too worn for this side of the bay. San Francisco gleamed around them like a cathedral of glass and ambition. And somewhere inside the City Hall rotunda, a gala was waiting, with strings, speeches, stockholders, and secrets. Earlier that morning, at the old house in Willamette Valley, Madison had extended the invitation over breakfast. "I want you both to come with me to San Francisco," she said. "There's a gala for Skylens, launching the public preview of Icarus Plus. You don't have to stay long, but I'd like you there." Jack furrowed his brow. "Us? Why?" "Because you saved my life," Madison replied. "And because Ella's design helped refine one of the flight simulators we're presenting tonight. She deserves to see her work honored." Ella dropped her spoon. "Wait, me? At a science gala?" Madison smiled. "Not just attend. You'll be part of the Young Innovators Showcase. And Jack, I know it's not your world, but I think it should be." Jack stared at the eggs on his plate, uncertain. "Wear whatever makes you feel like yourself," Madison added softly. "I'm not inviting the version of you that fits the room. I'm inviting you." And that was how they ended up in the back seat of a corporate SUV, approaching City Hall with Ella clutching her glider prototype like it was treasure. The rotunda was a whirlwind. Crystal chandeliers hung like galaxies overhead. Waiters in black vests passed glasses of champagne. Journalists clustered around a large digital model of the Icarus Plus interface, its threads of neural flight AI spinning like gold silk in a glass tower. As they entered, all eyes drifted toward Madison, back in her element, in a tailored dark green evening gown with subtle golden cuffs. But instead of walking ahead, she reached back for Ella's hand. "This way," she whispered, guiding them to the children's science showcase, a glowing ring of displays near the central staircase. Ella's station was beside a boy demonstrating micro-drones and a girl showcasing an app that helped people with dyslexia read more fluidly. Jack kept his eyes low. The floor gleamed too bright, the suits too tight, the eyes too polished. He felt like a misplaced wrench in a showroom. But when Ella stood beside her display and began to explain her neural reactive glider to a curious woman in a burgundy dress, her voice calm, precise, electric with wonder, Jack forgot his discomfort. She was flying. Not in the air, not yet, but in her own way. She was soaring. Meanwhile, across the hall, something darker stirred. From behind a column, a man in a navy suit adjusted his earpiece and murmured, "She's here. Target confirmed. Upload in progress." A laptop flickered on behind the main Icarus Plus demonstration table. A disguised thumb drive blinked red once, then twice. Jack noticed the man, not because he looked suspicious, but because he moved like someone trained to disappear. The old instincts in Jack's bones awakened. He excused himself from Ella's table and followed quietly. The man slipped behind the restricted area marked "Engineers Access Only." Jack waited 10 seconds, then ducked under the velvet rope. Inside, among servers and processors humming low, the man crouched behind a machine. Jack saw the blinking USB again. He didn't hesitate. "Hey!" Jack barked. The man jerked around, caught, and lunged. They crashed into the server tower, metal clanging like thunder. The man pulled something from his jacket. Jack grabbed his wrist, twisted hard, disarming him. Security guards burst in moments later. Jack tossed them the drive and the man. "He was in the mainframe," Jack said, breathing hard. The head of security blinked. "Who are you?" "Jack Whitaker. I'm with Madison Chen." Across the room, Madison had just stepped onto the stage. She paused mid-sentence when she saw the commotion, and then locked eyes with Jack from across the rotunda. She didn't need a report. She knew. Later that night, in a quiet hallway outside the gala ballroom, she walked toward him. "You okay?" she asked. Jack nodded. "I'm fine. Guy was sloppy, ex-military but impatient. Probably a contractor hired by Red Nova. The flash drive had auto-exfiltration code targeting your interface layer. Madison sighed. That's the 4th attempt this month. Well, Jack said, they're getting desperate. She looked at him. Not just looked, but saw. In his stance, the precision, the quick thinking, the years of tactical decision-making beneath his quiet. You're not just a technician, she said. Jack shrugged. Spent 9 years in signals and cyber EW with the 101st Airborne. Retired after my wife passed. Ella needed stability. I didn't want her growing up with a father who chased shadows. Madison nodded slowly. Then she handed him a small black pin, Skylen's internal team badge. Come with us, she said. Not just as a guest. As part of the Icarus Plus team. You just defended our future better than anyone on payroll. Jack stared at the pin in his palm. I'm a farmer, he said. Madison smiled. And you're the most grounded person I've ever met in this field. He didn't answer. But he didn't hand the pin back either. That night, as the gala ended, Jack walked out onto the terrace overlooking San Francisco Bay. Ella joined him a few minutes later, holding a folded ribbon. Best in Showcase, Youth Division. I'm proud of you, he said softly. She leaned against him. Dad, do you think this is where we belong? Jack looked out at the skyline, then down at the pin in his hand, then back at his daughter, eyes full of wonder and wind. I don't know yet, he said, but maybe it's where we're meant to land. They said the gala had ended, but the storm hadn't. Rain fell like velvet knives on the streets of San Francisco. The glass towers glistened with light, but inside Skylen's headquarters, something darker brewed behind firewalls and formal smiles. Jack stood by the wide bay window on the 41st floor, his new badge clipped to his belt, watching the clouds churn over the Golden Gate. Across the office, Madison scrolled through digital logs with quiet intensity. Her hair, normally so precise, was damp from the rush of interviews and briefings, but her eyes were still sharp. They tried again last night, she murmured. Jack crossed his arms. Same backdoor signature? Madison nodded. They slipped a dummy kernel into the software preview that ran during Ella's demo. Subtle. Elegant. But they didn't count on your patch catching it before it escalated. Jack frowned. Mercer's getting smarter. Mercer Redfield, CEO of Red Nova Systems, had once been Madison's biggest competitor. Now he was something else entirely. A man who believed data was destiny, no matter the cost. He's not working alone anymore, Madison said quietly. He's building an inside ring. I can feel it. I just don't know who he's bought off yet. Jack looked over his shoulder, where Ella was sitting cross-legged in a beanbag, building a mini drone with her Skylen's youth kit. She was humming. She didn't know a war was happening under her feet. That night, Skylen's held an internal reception for its lead engineers, investors, and a few key families, part celebration, part political theater. The venue, a glass atrium at the top of the Salesforce Tower. Jack wore a new navy blazer. Ella wore a borrowed sky blue dress from Madison's assistant, with her hair braided down one side like a curious princess of flight. She clutched Jack's hand tightly in the elevator. There'll be a lot of people, huh? Jack nodded. Most of them pretending to listen while thinking about money. Ella smirked. So? Grown-ups. Jack chuckled. Exactly. The elevator doors opened to reveal an atrium glowing with warm gold light. There were string quartets. Floating holograms of the Icarus Plus interface spun slowly between glass pillars. The skyline outside was wrapped in storm clouds and steel. They stepped in. At first, it was dazzling. Madison introduced Jack to engineers who had PhDs from MIT but couldn't make a pot of coffee. Investors who wore watches worth more than Jack's house. Ella met a young coder from Berlin who taught her to rewrite drone flight paths using only iris movement. But the night took a turn. It started with the storm. The glass trembled faintly as thunder rolled across the bay. Then, a flicker in the lights. Jack noticed it first, a ripple in the visual projections. The holograms glitched, just for a second, too quick for most to see. But he knew static when he saw it, and he knew sabotage when it whispered behind a firewall. He turned to Madison. "Something's wrong," he said. At that moment, a wall of data behind the podium stuttered. The SkyLens interface collapsed into static, then resolved, showing an open code panel no one had authorized. From behind the stage, a scream. Madison rushed forward, but Jack was faster. In the control room beneath the atrium, chaos unfolded. Someone had accessed the neural feedback test console, the prototype system that had made Ella's glider possible. And worse, the AI's live demo environment had been linked to open cloud channels. Jack burst through the security door, saw two guards unconscious on the floor, and standing at the console was Ella. Or so he thought. But when she turned, it wasn't Ella. It was a girl wearing a wig, her posture mimicking Ella's exactly. A decoy. "Don't move," Jack barked. The girl darted for the emergency exit. Jack chased her through the maintenance corridor, thunder booming above like war drums. They hit the stairwell. She was fast, barefoot, precise. But Jack had trained for worse in Kandahar alleyways and hurricane zones. On the 6th floor, he caught her arm. The wig fell off. She was no older than 16, terrified, shaking. "Who sent you?" Jack asked, breathless. She looked up, and Jack's heart cracked. She had a burn scar across one cheek. Fresh. Her eyes flicked to the SkyLens ID on Jack's chest. She spat. "I needed the cure." Jack blinked. "What cure?" She dropped a drive in his hand, whispered, "He said he could fix my brother, if I got him the files." Jack held her shoulders gently now. "Who is he?" But she didn't answer, only looked past him, toward the lights, and wept. Later, in Madison's office, Jack handed her the drive. "She's just a kid," he said. "Recruited by someone inside. Promised a treatment for her brother in exchange for infiltration." Madison stared at the drive. "This isn't about business anymore," she said. "It's about control. Red Nova isn't trying to compete. They're trying to own every cure that comes from neural interface technology." Jack nodded. "And they're willing to use children to get it." Madison sat down, suddenly tired. "I used to believe tech could only do good," she said. "That the brighter the future, the safer we'd be." Jack sat across from her. "Brightness attracts thieves, too." She smiled, but faintly. "I'm scared, Jack. Not for the company, for Ella, for every kid like that girl in the stairwell. What happens when people stop seeing their humanity and start seeing only their data?" Jack reached across the desk and took her hand. "They still have people like you," he said. "And now, they have me too." She didn't speak. but the silence was full of storm light, and something new. Trust. The rain hadn't stopped. It had become a steady rhythm against the tall windows of Skyland's executive residence, an eerie lullaby that reminded Jack Whitaker of barracks tents flapping in desert winds. But this wasn't the battlefield. Or maybe it was, just with different weapons. He stood on the private balcony of the penthouse Madison had insisted they stay in, the San Francisco skyline flickering beneath a silver curtain of mist. Somewhere behind him, Ella's laughter rang out as she raced a flying AI-powered drone around the living room. Madison was inside too, talking with her legal team in hushed, rapid Mandarin. Jack had never felt so out of place, or so needed. The morning after the gala breach, Jack had been summoned to Madison's private office. She stood by the window, dressed in a dark cashmere sweater, her hair pinned up, eyes stormy with fatigue. There was something different in her that morning. No longer just the composed tech mogul, but a woman who had weathered something real, something human, and who had come out on the other side, changed. She didn't speak at first, just handed Jack a manila envelope. He opened it slowly. Inside, a formal job offer. Position: Director of Practical Engineering, Skylens Technologies. Compensation: generous. Almost absurdly so. Perks: full housing, education grant for Ella, discretionary stock, full protection clause. Start date: immediate. Jack stared at it. This is a real offer? Madison's voice was steady but tired. I need someone who understands the real world, who doesn't just run simulations. You saw what happened last night. We're not just building devices, Jack. We're becoming targets, and the only way we survive is to build with people like you. Jack looked up slowly. You sure I'm not just the guy who tackled a teenager and fixed a firewall? A smile ghosted her lips. That helps. Jack didn't accept right away. He took Ella out for breakfast instead, just the two of them, in a quiet diner across from Ocean Beach. She stirred her cocoa with both hands, legs swinging from the booth. Will I still get to fly stuff if you take the job? Jack raised an eyebrow. That's your first question? Ella shrugged. Well, yeah. Flying stuff is kind of our thing. Jack exhaled, eyes softening. It might mean leaving everything we're used to behind. Ella looked at him, her face suddenly serious. We already did that once, remember? When Mom got sick. When we had to sell everything and move into that tiny rental in Junction City. You gave up flying then. You gave up everything. Jack nodded. The memory still ached. So maybe, Ella said quietly, it's okay if we start over. Just this time, we don't lose the sky. He signed the offer that afternoon, but as soon as he did, the shadows returned. That night, Jack received a manila envelope slid under their penthouse door. No markings, no note. Inside were printed photographs, grainy but unmistakable. Photos of him and Ella entering the Skylens building, walking along the Embarcadero, Ella eating ice cream in a park. The final image, Jack's face circled in red ink. He stood frozen in the kitchen, staring at them under the harsh LED light. His pulse thudded in his ears. Whoever had taken these photos wasn't just watching, they were threatening. He showed Madison the next morning. She paled. Pacifica, California, a private tech campus by the ocean just south of San Francisco. It was where she'd grown up in a foster home 2 blocks inland before winning the Intel Science Award at 16 and earning a scholarship to Stanford. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Full circle," she said as they stepped into the quiet cliffside residence. It was safe, heavily monitored. But still, Jack installed his own counter-surveillance system. Old school, hardwired, analog fail-safes. He taught Ella how to trigger a panic lock in 5 seconds, taught her to memorize exits, to look for reflections in glass. "Are we in danger, Daddy?" she asked once, eyes wide. Jack hesitated. "Not today," he said gently, "but we're prepared." Ella nodded like a soldier. Late that night, Jack couldn't sleep. He sat on the balcony again, the Pacific roaring beneath the cliffs. Madison joined him. She wore a soft blue hoodie and no makeup. The CEO was gone. Only the woman remained. "What if we fail?" she asked quietly. Jack didn't look away from the sea. "Then we start over, again and again, until we don't." She leaned back. "Is that what soldiers do?" He nodded. "That's what fathers do." She closed her eyes. The wind caught her hair. And for the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something more powerful than fear. Faith. The sea whispered against the cliffs of Pacifica as dawn broke in streaks of rose gold and blue. In the quiet executive compound, Ella Whitaker adjusted a solar panel prototype outside her new bedroom window. It was her 3rd day at the SkyLens Innovation Academy, and she had already made friends, presented a wind-powered drone design, and memorized the cafeteria's dessert schedule. Jack watched her from the kitchen with quiet awe. He hadn't seen her this alive in years, but as she disappeared back into her room, a strange ache settled in his chest. Because while Ella was stepping forward, part of him still lived in the past, and he wasn't the only one. That afternoon, Madison invited him for coffee on the rooftop terrace of the SkyLens Pacifica Tower. Though it was technically a residence, the top 2 floors looked more like a minimalist tech palace. Open-plan glass, bamboo flooring, and floor-to-ceiling bookshelves that made Jack feel like he was inside a design magazine. She handed him a cup of Cuban roast and sat across from him, the ocean wind tugging gently at her loose cardigan. "I've been avoiding this," she said. Jack raised an eyebrow. "Avoiding what?" She took a breath. "Telling you who I really was. Before I was Madison Chen, CEO, before SkyLens, before the magazine covers." Jack said nothing, just sipped his coffee and waited. "I grew up 5 blocks from here," she continued. "Foster home, 6 kids, 3 bunk beds, 1 broken heater. My file said I had disruptive behavioral tendencies, because I'd take apart broken calculators and put them back together. Because I didn't talk much, but when I did, I corrected my teachers." A wry smile touched her lips. "Then one day someone donated a box of old MIT textbooks to our group home. I was 10. By 12, I was writing code. By 15, I was winning science fairs. But every time I stood on stage holding a trophy, all I could think was, I'm still just a number in someone else's file." Jack leaned forward. "You built all this to change that?" She met his gaze. "No. I built this so no kid like me would have to feel disposable again." Jack's voice softened. "And now that kid is fighting off billion-dollar espionage." She laughed, a tired, real laugh. "Not exactly what I pictured when I dreamed of having a lab in a barn." That evening, Jack wandered into the SkyLens archives. one of the few rooms he hadn't explored. It was quiet, climate-controlled, lined with interactive panels and physical memorabilia, the first Icarus prototype, photos from international hackathons, letters from patients who had used Skylens assistive tech to walk again or speak for the first time. In the center of the room was something unexpected, a single black and white photo in a brushed steel frame. It showed a girl, maybe 12, standing barefoot on a school basketball court, holding a makeshift science project. Her hair was wild. Her eyes blazed with fire. Below it, a plaque. Madison Chen, age 12. Solar-powered pulley lifter. He stared at it for a long time, and then he understood. She hadn't just built Skylens to fix the world. She'd built it to redeem it. Back at the penthouse, Jack found Ella painting constellations on her ceiling. "Want to see something?" she asked, eyes shining. She took his hand and led him into the living room, where she had set up an elaborate coding game using Icarus microchips. When he moved his eyes in a specific pattern, the toy rocket she'd built lit up and launched 2 feet into the air. Jack blinked. "You built a functional neuro-interface rocket?" Ella grinned. "Madison helped." He stared at her, stunned. "How long did it take?" 2 afternoons, and 1 almond milk hot chocolate." Jack swallowed hard. She was thriving, learning, leading. But he couldn't shake the fear that it could all vanish again. "I don't want you to get too attached," he said quietly. Ella tilted her head. "To what? Rockets? To this. The tower. The team. The tech." Ella walked over to him, arms folded. "Daddy, I've been poor. I've lost Mom. I've eaten peanut butter for dinner 5 nights a week. I know what it's like when things fall apart." She looked up at him, unblinking. "But that doesn't mean I'm afraid to build." Jack felt something crack open in his chest. Not pain, not fear. Pride. Later that night, as fog rolled in over the ocean, Jack sat with Madison on the same terrace. She was quiet, too quiet. "What's wrong?" he asked. She hesitated. "There's something I haven't told you." He turned toward her, waiting. "Icarus Plus works. It's almost perfect. But it requires one thing we haven't tested on humans yet: real-time emotional variance recognition. The system can track eye movement, yes, but to be truly safe, it needs to read human intention, emotion, and moral intent." Jack frowned. "You mean a soul?" She chuckled. "Close. I mean context, humanity, which no algorithm has fully cracked." Jack leaned back. "So what's your plan?" Her eyes glinted. "You," he blinked. "Me? I want you to co-lead the human integration trials. You think differently. You see danger before it hits. You're not afraid to say no." Jack shook his head. "I'm not a scientist." "No," she said. "You're a father. And right now, I need someone who'll fight for what matters more than profit." He didn't answer. Not yet. But inside, something shifted. That night, he opened the drawer beside his bed. Inside was a photograph he hadn't touched in over 2 years. Sarah, holding newborn Ella in the old RV park near Tillamook. Her smile was radiant, uncomplicated, honest. Jack placed the photo on the nightstand. Then he turned out the light. And for the first time since his wife died, he didn't dream of what he'd lost. He dreamt of what he could help build. The scent of polished steel and jasmine tea floated through the glass atrium of the International Future Tech Summit in San Jose. LED banners cascaded down from the 20-story ceiling, spelling out words like vision, neurotech, and post-silicon evolution. The brightest minds from Tokyo, Tel Aviv, Berlin, and Silicon Valley had gathered. And at the center of it all stood Ella Whitaker, 12 years old, wearing a tailored navy jumpsuit and a SkyLens badge twice the size of her hand. She wasn't nervous. She was electric. Outside the Summit Center, Jack tightened the strap on his shoulder bag, one hand on his daughter's neuro-interface kit. His military instincts hadn't dulled. The way a technician lingered too long by a junction box, the way a coffee vendor scanned badges twice, details that most people missed, Jack felt in his bones. Inside, Madison was prepping her keynote on the second floor. She hadn't slept much the night before. Jack knew because neither had he. Her tremors had returned, barely visible but real. She doubled her meds, hid it from the press, smiled like the world wasn't closing in. He didn't say a word, but he saw everything. At 2:37 p.m., Ella stepped onto the stage in Hall C. Dozens of tech executives leaned forward. A neuro-interface prototype was already on the table. Ella spoke clearly into the mic. My name is Ella Whitaker. I live in Pacifica, California, and I built this interface in 2 weeks using open-source tools from SkyLens, plus a bit of stubbornness. Laughter. Then applause. She smiled, placed the prototype over her temple, and began a sequence. The drone on stage hovered, then rotated, then spelled her name mid-air in blue lights. The room went wild. But across the building, Mercer Lang, the shark-smiled CEO of Red Nova Technologies, was already in motion. He wasn't there to clap. He was there to destroy. Behind his team, 2 cloud engineers had quietly accessed the summit's shared Wi-Fi architecture using a cloned SkyLens admin credential. The Icarus Plus algorithm, still in protected sandbox, had a backdoor vulnerability Mercer's team had discovered months ago, when a former SkyLens contractor took a bribe. All he needed was a 30-second packet pull, and SkyLens would be his. But Jack wasn't just watching Ella. He'd already flagged the unusual MAC address spiking during her demo. He'd seen the nervous twitch of the Red Nova intern stationed by the water dispenser, and when he walked past the server junction in Hall B, he noticed a small sticker, barely visible, placed on the inside of a fiber hub. It wasn't a SkyLens asset tag. It was Red Nova's. Breach, Jack whispered into his comm. SkyLens security scrambled, but the breach was already underway. Upstairs, in the SkyLens command trailer, Madison watched the code fragment cascade across the firewall monitors. Strings of neural mapping data were being pulled, live. The Icarus Plus architecture. Ella's demo. Everything. No, Madison breathed. She grabbed the mic. Initiate mirror lockdown protocol. Cut real-time API sync. I repeat, cut all live streams now. Ma'am, the keynote. Do it. In the crowd below, the drone sputtered and fell. Ella blinked, startled. The audience murmured. Madison's voice cut through the auditorium. Ladies and gentlemen, due to a security incident, we are pausing the live demo and asking you to step back from connected devices. Ella stood frozen. Then her father appeared at the edge of the stage, calm, focused. He knelt beside her and whispered, You didn't fail. They just tried to cheat. Ella nodded, jaw tight. Then let's show them who we are. In the secure command room, Jack took control. Using his background in field encryption, he initiated a loop-back trace and physical triangulation on the source of the breach. In under 5 minutes, he and Skylend's top cybersecurity officer located the device hidden in a Red Nova optics case backstage. By 4:20 p.m., Mercer Lang was in handcuffs. By 5:00 p.m., FBI agents had raided Red Nova's Palo Alto headquarters and seized 8 petabytes of illegally obtained data. Madison watched the news report silently. Her fingers curled around the edge of her tablet. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. But Jack watched her stand straighter, breath steadier. A woman who had nearly lost her legacy and saved it with the help of a little girl and a man who refused to stand by. That night, Skylens issued a press statement. We faced an unprecedented act of cyber aggression, but we did not fall, because this company was not built on code. It was built on people, and that is something no algorithm can duplicate. It went viral within hours. In their Pacifica home, Ella curled up on the couch beside Jack. She looked tired, but not defeated. "Do you think Mom would have liked my demo?" she asked quietly. Jack stroked her hair. "She would have said, 'That's my girl,' and then told me to buy you ice cream." Ella grinned sleepily. "Vanilla with caramel. Double scoop." Meanwhile, Madison stood alone in the Skylens R&D lab, staring at a new render of Icarus Plus, now dubbed Icarus Phoenix. Next to the control panel was a picture someone had placed without her noticing, the 12-year-old Madison with her solar pulley. Below it, a sticky note in Jack's handwriting, "We're not machines, but we do rise." She closed her eyes and smiled. The air in Pacifica tasted different now, salty but sweet, like a story that had learned how to end with hope. It had been 6 months since the International Future Tech Summit, since the firewalls held, since the world stopped seeing Madison Chen as just a cold-blooded CEO and began to see her as something else, a human being with a tremor in her hand, a fire in her chest, and a girl with wings by her side. And standing beside her, no longer a bystander in her orbit, was Jack Whitaker. The new Skylens Practical Applications campus was built into a bluff over the Pacific Ocean. Jack had helped design it. Floor plans drawn on paper scraps at the kitchen table, Ella chiming in with doodles of solar panels and windmills. The architecture was minimalist, warm, efficient, and very, very human. Jack wasn't just a former military tech anymore. He was now the director of practical engineering, and his badge was no longer temporary. He wore it on his chest like a quiet medal. "Dad, you're going to be late." Ella's voice rang from upstairs. She was adjusting the strap on her new backpack, emblazoned with the crest of the Young Innovators of America. Out of thousands of national applicants, she had been awarded a full scholarship to join the program for gifted STEM youth. The letter had made Jack cry. Not in front of her, of course, but in the garage, next to the old lawnmower. "You look like an astronaut," he said now. "I feel like one," she grinned. And then, more quietly, "You think she'll be proud of me?" He didn't have to ask who. He reached into the drawer, pulled out a photo of Sarah, smiling at a 4th of July picnic, her hair wind-tangled, sun in her teeth. "She already is." At Skyland's HQ that morning, Jack met Madison by the observation deck. She was wearing a pale blue blouse, one that didn't hide the slight tremor in her left hand. She didn't hide much anymore. "How's your morning?" Jack asked, sipping his coffee. "Started at 4 a.m., she replied with a wry smile. "We had a partner in Ghana finalize a rural pilot using Icarus Phoenix. Children who've never been to school are using neuro interfaces to learn basic math, just by looking." Jack shook his head, half in awe. "And I was proud I figured out how to fix the HVAC with an AI loop." "That's why I need you," Madison said, "to make the future work, not just exist." There was silence for a moment. The Pacific rolled out endlessly beneath them. "You know," she added softly, "I always thought it'd be lonely up here. Success, power, all of it. But maybe I was just waiting for the right kind of company." Jack turned to her. "I'm not going anywhere," he said. "Not now, not ever. Not—" By mid-afternoon, Ella had already hacked the learning module assigned to her group and written a plugin that helped dyslexic students follow word patterns using sound waves. Jack picked her up from the training center. She didn't want to leave. He smiled and said, "Even rockets need refueling." She rolled her eyes. "Dad, that was so cheesy." But she still held his hand walking to the car. That night, they invited Madison over for dinner. Their new home in Pacifica wasn't large, but it had warmth. Shelves built by Jack's hands. Walls painted by Ella's brush. On the porch hung a wind chime made from pieces of the downed plane. Madison's, her past, now part of their present. They ate grilled salmon and sweet corn and laughed about how Ella once thought CEOs didn't eat carbohydrates. "I thought you lived on protein shakes and email," she teased Madison. "I used to," Madison smiled. "Now I prefer burnt toast and real people." Later, Jack brought out a surprise. A small box. Inside, a silver compass, restored and engraved. "To the one who always brought us home. J&E." Madison's hands trembled as she touched it. She didn't speak for a long moment, then softly, "You changed my direction." Jack shook his head. "You gave me mine." Before bed, Ella stood on the balcony, wind brushing her curls. "Can we go back?" she asked Jack. "To the farm?" He nodded. "One more time." She nodded. "I want to show her where I built my first wing, where we started." "We'll go." And they would. Because the future didn't erase the past. It gave it a new place to belong. A year had passed, 12 moons, 4 seasons, 1,000 tiny invisible changes that you could only notice when you stood still and looked back. The Willamette Valley was still the same, wheat rolling in golden waves, the wind pulling stories through the grass. But the farmhouse on the eastern ridge had changed. The roof had been patched. The windows no longer groaned in their frames, and the yard had been cleared of rusting tools and silence. Jack, Ella, and Madison stood in the center of the old field. There, where fire had once threatened to swallow their lives, they were about to plant something that would grow longer than all of them. Jack held the small oak sapling like it was made of crystal. Its roots were balled in burlap. Its trunk, thin but firm, leaned gently toward the morning sun. Ella had chosen it. "We could plant a tree anywhere," Jack had said. "But I want it here," she'd replied, "where we almost lost everything. That way it means more." They dug the hole in silence. Madison's hands trembled, but not just from the Parkinson's. It was the memory. The crack of the sky that night. The smell of fuel. The cold metal of the plane. Jack's arms pulling her free, Ella's voice whispering, "It's okay. We've got you." They lowered the oak into the earth. Jack knelt and pressed the soil down gently. His fingers lingered at the base. Then Madison stepped forward. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something wrapped in silk, a tiny silver wing. It had once been part of her pilot's badge, bent, scorched, useless. She placed it beneath the tree's roots. "For everything that no longer flies," she whispered. Ella nodded. "And everything that will." Inside the old house, things had changed too. What was once a dusty living room was now Sky Roots Lab, a non-profit learning center for rural kids. Children from the valley came every weekend to learn STEM from Ella, who, despite only being 13, had become a sensation after her work with Skylens. She didn't want to be famous. She just wanted other kids to dream. One girl, named Rosa, had cried the first time she controlled a drone using only her eye movement. "I thought I was too dumb for this," she'd said. Ella had hugged her. "No one's too dumb to fly. You just haven't found your wings yet." That afternoon, Jack stood alone by the front porch. In his hands, he held a frame. Inside it was a photo, worn, familiar. Sarah, his late wife, smiling in a field just like this one. Next to it, a newer photo. Ella and Madison, laughing over a half-burnt piece of toast. He removed the old photo from the single frame and slid both pictures into a double one. Then he placed it on the mantel. One family, not erased, but expanded. As the sun began to set, Jack and Madison sat on the back steps, watching the oak tree sway. "It's still so small," Madison said softly. Jack nodded. "But it'll outlive us. That's the point." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "You ever wonder how all this happened?" He chuckled. "Every day." Madison looked out across the valley. "I used to think technology was the future. That if I built the fastest system, the most advanced algorithm, I'd win. But this is what I missed." She gestured toward the children's laughter echoing from inside. The tree catching the last orange light. The man beside her who never asked for anything, but gave everything. This is the future. That night, the three of them sat around the dinner table, sharing stories over bowls of stew and cornbread. No gala, no headlines, just peace. Later, as Ella was brushing her teeth, she paused. "Dad?" Jack poked his head around the corner. "Yes, sweetheart?" "You know that thing you said about people needing to stand still to see how far they've come?" He nodded. She smiled. "I stood still today." And outside, under the Oregon sky, the oak tree stood too, young, brave, and full of beginnings.